President Trump is holding a signing ceremony today for the Board of Peace. Already nearly 20 countries have agreed to participate for 3 years. Now, if they decide to extend, they can pledge $1 billion each toward this initiative. The countries can then become permanent members, according to a draft of the charter. Some of the participants, like the UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco, have already normalized ties with Israel through the Abraham Accords, making them obvious choices. Others, like Pakistan and Belarus, are new to the arena. After ending the war in Gaza by reaching a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, the president is now looking at stabilizing the region and even indicated that the board could have responsibilities well beyond Gaza.
I think the Board of Peace will be the most prestigious board ever, and it's going to get a lot of work done that the United Nations should have done. And we'll work with the United Nations, but the Board of Peace is going to be special. We're going to have peace. It started off with Gaza, the Middle East. We've got peace in the Middle East, tremendous peace in the Middle East. Nobody thought that was possible.
Reports indicate President Trump could chair the Board of Peace indefinitely, even once he's out of office. As peace advances on the diplomatic level, the situation in Gaza remains fragile. On Wednesday, Israeli forces struck a car filled with 3 journalists, killing them all. The IDF told Fox News they were flying a Hamas drone, but provided no additional evidence. In another incident, a 10-year-old was killed, and in a separate incident, a 13-year-old also killed by Israeli forces. So as you have this Board of Peace officially launched today, the Gaza ceasefire remains fragile. U.S. officials say they are confident about phase 2 in that agreement. Todd, Carly?
Yeah, Trey, we know that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu initially had serious concerns about this board because he had objections to Qatar and Turkey being invited, but ultimately said that he would sign on. Do you have any insight as to what changed his mind?
President Trump has been very clear. He wants the peace initiative inside Gaza to not only expand to the region, but the broader world as an example of what peace can look like in this region. And that's part of the reason you've seen countries like Russia invited to the Board of Peace, understanding that if the president can get countries that are currently at war in other locations across the globe to sign on, it could lead to the ability of him to get something done in that conflict. And so this is really an initial board that will be signed in today. Again, around 20 countries. We know up to 60 have been invited. And there's a clear indication that while some of these countries aren't yet pledging that $1 billion, that they see the value in this initiative. They see that this could lead to a broader peace across the region. And that's why the president has invited such a diverse list of countries to this initiative.
Yeah, and as you said, you get 3 years for free, but then it'll cost you in that 4th year to the tune of $1 billion. Trey, thank you so much for joining us. We'll check back in with you very shortly. All right, let's bring in Hudson Institute senior fellow and former senior foreign policy advisor to Senator Tom Cotton, Aaron MacLean. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to see you again. So we're talking about the Board of Peace, and this conversation can go in a variety of different directions. But first, just your broad thoughts, overall opinion on this board, where there are certainly some countries who have been invited to join it who would not be considered peaceful, and then U.S. allies who have declined the invitation.
Hey, good morning, guys. Slow news day. I was wondering what we're going to talk about.
All right.
On the Board of Peace, you know, in foreign policy, President Trump does this thing where, you know, young people talk about manifesting. He likes to manifest things into being. This is an example of that. He is thinking steps ahead of the actual immediate problems that still need to be solved. And the amazing thing is when the president does this, sometimes it works. He sort of manifested into being the release of the hostages from Gaza last fall. You could argue that the Abraham Accords in his first term was an example of something similar. So here we have this new institution coming together. We're going to sign the documents, chartering it on stage here momentarily. The immediate problem that it is sort of passing through is the disarmament of Hamas, which is still there, still armed. The president is very clear-eyed about this and has said repeatedly that he believes they are going to disarm, and I believe his exact words were, if they don't, they're going to be, quote, blown away. So this Board of Peace is sort of the steps 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 after that first and second step of disarmament. You know, it's an alternative in certain respects to the United Nations, and we should talk about that and what it means.
Yeah, to that point, the Board of Peace is designed to implement the 20-point peace plan for Gaza, but it does not mention the word Gaza. And so I think that leads us to the question, is this meant to replace the UN? The White House insists it is not. Do you buy that? And follow-up question, is it such a bad thing if it does replace the UN?
Replaced? No, and the president is sort of teases but then pulls back from something that goes quite that far. Certainly on some level compete with. And look, again, just sticking with the base case here of Gaza and the situation around Israel, the institution that's failed the most spectacularly in this part of the world is the United Nations. You have UN organizations like UNRWA and Gaza essentially integrated with terrorist groups like Hamas. You have UNIFIL in Lebanon, which, while not integrated necessarily with Hezbollah, certainly has run cover for Lebanese Hezbollah for a generation plus. This is a manifest failure of the international system that we have in the world today. So this notion that somehow the Board of Peace just definitionally poses a threat to the international order, et cetera. It seems pretty international to me as further countries sign up for it. And definitionally, if it's doing its job, it is providing a form of order. There's nothing in the history of international relations that suggests that it's somehow unusual for countries willing to solve a problem to come together and solve a problem. And the president obviously has ambitions that it goes beyond Gaza.
Yeah, so as Trey was saying, 8 prominent Muslim countries jointly announced their decision to join this board, including Saudi Arabia. And the President Trump getting Saudi Arabia to sign on was very important to him. So I'm sure he's very happy about that. But something that I was wondering, as we're about to see history unfold with the signing of this board, would this moment, do you think, Aaron, be possible if Operation Midnight Hammer wasn't such a success? Because the president has talked a lot about how Middle Eastern countries overall felt really crippled by Iran and the nuclear threat that it once was. And you just have to wonder if this board would be as successful as it possibly could be if Iran was still a nuclear-powered country or inching towards it.
It's a great question, and I agree with the premise. The president's assertion of American power in the region, his decision to back our traditional ally Israel, his decision to back Arab states that were feeling pressure and threats from the rise of Iranian power has led to the circumstances that we're in today, where we are trying to solve these last but very difficult, thorny problems of Hamas still operating in Gaza. Iranian power is waning. It really is a new Middle East. It's a new Middle East because Iran rolled the dice on its war with Israel through a variety of proxies that began in the fall of 2023. It has now lost that war. America intervened decisively in one of the climactic later episodes of that war, and that has set the conditions for all that we see today. So major problems still to be solved, but you're absolutely right. We are only at where we are because of the first year of the president's foreign policy.
You mentioned sarcastically at the top that we have nothing to talk about, so let's add another non-topic to talk about.
Right.
This
Pretty
is a
important
one. Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are expected to meet with Vladimir Putin today in Russia, while Ukrainian President Zelensky is slated to meet with President Trump in Davos. Aaron, will anything come of these meetings, or is the broken record of meetings without peace bound to play on?
The cynic in me suggests that progress here might be hard to achieve. And this is one of those situations it's really complicated in the details, and we should get into those. But the big picture, I think, is actually quite simple. If you went to the Ukrainians today and said, are you willing to do a ceasefire roughly along current lines so that we can work out everything else, they would, as they have numerous times in the past year, say yes. If you take the same question to the Russians, they will say no. Because the Russians' goals, as just restated, by the way, just in the last 48 hours by Sergei Lavrov in Davos, remain quite maximalist. They want territorial concessions and the destruction of Ukrainian sovereignty on a scale that's completely unacceptable to the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians obviously cannot accept that. The Europeans don't want it. And President Trump so far has shown no particular inclination to compel the Ukrainians and the Europeans into accepting something like that. So the Russians know this. They know that this is sort of the barrier that they face. And so, again, a cynic might suggest that their real role and goal here is to stall but not get blamed for the stalling. So we'll see what happens. Witkoff and Jared Kushner have been meeting with Russian envoys in Davos. They had a meeting with Kirill Dmitriev there yesterday, said there are land deals on the table. But meanwhile, you have Lavrov saying publicly that Russia's original goals for the war essentially remain in effect, and that the 20-point peace plan is not acceptable.
Yeah, and as Witkoff and Kushner headed to Moscow to meet with Vladimir Putin, President Trump is going to be meeting with Vladimir Zelensky later today as well. So a notable meeting to follow. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your insight.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.